Um, do we have Mr. O'Malley on the line? Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Stephen?
Yes.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm sorry, I've got a helicopter in the background.
That's okay. It happens. I will give you the floor to remind our colleagues here that you are calling in from Dominica. And Stephen, you have the floor, and then we'll take some few questions. Over to you.
Okay, well, great, and thank you for having me. Very quickly, I would just say I was here a week ago, and I came back just this morning, and even in that short space of time, you can see a significant transformation. What was really shocking for me, and I've been here probably 8 or 9 times over the last 4 years when I came in last time, was that the island, which is known as the Nature Isle of the Caribbean, was almost totally brown. The leaves, the vegetation had been blown off, the trees, etc. And now I'm sitting here, and as I was coming in, you can start to see that green come back up on the hillside. And that's matched by a lot of progress on the ground as well. The streets are clear. I saw garbage being collected. Roads are opening up. We can get to almost every part of the country by road now, and that was different just last week. Power is coming back, at least to the capital, Rosso, and some other locations. Water is coming back up. 9,000 people have water from the mains as opposed to nobody just last week. The World Food Program, working with the government, has managed to distribute 60 metric tons of food in the last week. That's both relief food and food the government had. That feeds about 30,000 people. That's half the population. We have another 30 metric tons of WFP food coming in, as well as commercial shipments. There are more than 40 UN staff on the ground. We've got UNICEF, World Food Program, OCHA, IOM, others who I'm forgetting, as well as we've had excellent support from the militaries, the Venezuelans, the Americans, the UK, Canada, France, and Netherlands. So the operation is going in the right way. We're able to reach almost everybody, and we are getting food, water, and basic supplies out to people. There will be major challenges ahead, of course, as you can imagine. Okay, this helicopter's about to take off, so give me 30 seconds.
I hope it doesn't take off with him.
No. It's
okay.
It's actually a big. I'm overlooking the stadium, and that's the landing point for a number of the helicopters. And that was a big British Chinook helicopter dropping off stuff and heading out. So now we're in the stage 2 weeks in. Situation is stabilizing in some ways. The port is completely open. We're bringing in a lot of stuff. The government has directly asked the UN to work with them on a logistics plan to get regular supplies of relief items out, and that's something we're doing. And then the other big thing is that the government is very much focused on its recovery planning. The country, I give you indicatively, in 2015, when we had Tropical Storm Erica here, which lasted for about 6 hours, the total damage and loss associated with that was equivalent to 90% of the country's GDP. So now we're in this situation where this hurricane has been much more devastating than that. And as I say, the government is very much focused on a recovery plan, which it intends to take to Washington next week. It will be presenting at the fall meetings of the World Bank and the IMF. And they will be actively out there looking for the resources to support that fund. From the UN side, we obviously launched our own flash appeal. for $30 million. The Emergency Relief Coordinator has advanced already $3 million towards that. We're actively programming that. So perhaps I'll just start with that as a set of introductory remarks, and I can take comments.
Yes, go ahead, Ivan, and then Edie.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Waldo, Prensa Latina. What are the main needs on the ground right now in Dominica and Barbuda? And how can you evaluate the international response to the tragedy? Thank you very much.
Okay. So thanks very much. And I had the chance to be in Antigua yesterday and check in with the authorities there. So I'm comfortable to talk to Barbuda as well. Look, what we need to do now in Dominica is just keep up this regular supply of the basics for people. Make sure that the electricity comes up for people, because remember, these are countries which would have had 100%, more or less 100% access to regular electricity. So it's getting the electricity up, it's getting people's water supplies up, and getting markets functioning again. So the food has to start coming in. One of the things that the government is very conscious of is it wants to get cash into the hands of its workers and of consumers. So it's looking at ways to advance payments to civil servants. It's looking at ways to advance payments in terms of social protection schemes, pensions, and so on, so that people can start to buy things that they need, and so that the merchants can resume their economic activities. It's really, how do you get the economy back up off the ground? There is a huge reconstruction job to do in terms of roads and bridges. I'm very happy, when I came in this morning on the UN Humanitarian Air Service plane, we brought a couple of our colleagues from the World Bank. They're already starting their preliminary discussions with the government. So it is really keeping the basics going right now, and that, in the sense, creating the confidence amongst the population that the recovery plan will be successful. So we do, we continue to need assistance on the medical side. Although hospitals are open, we need to restore the health centers to their functioning as well. On Barbuda, there is some good news there in the sense that, as you know, the island was mandatorily evacuated, and I really have to give the full credit to the government for doing that. They managed to get, in an orderly fashion, all 1,800 people off the island in one day. They've been out there cleaning it up. They've been pumping out all the standing water. They've been spraying to reduce the mosquito population. They've been cleaning up dead farm animals and things like that from across the island. And they are allowing people to come back for the day to work on what they can do for their houses. But, 75% of the houses on the island at least suffered really severe damage. We need to get, a basic police service back up, basic hospital and medical care going again, so that you can have people who are staying overnight. I mean, as much as people want to go home, the government is also very conscious of it has to be a safe place for them. You asked about the international response. I mean, I really would have to say there are two groups two groups that I would really want to note. First is the Caribbean Disaster and Emergency Management Agency, that's SEDEMA, and the regional mechanisms that support that. So within a day after the hurricane having passed, a ship had left Barbados and arrived in Dominica with the initial aid workers from the Caribbean response system. So in that regard, the system worked. It got its people. When I landed at the airport today, you have policemen from St. Kitts, you have Jamaican soldiers, you have Trinidadian soldiers and policemen securing the airport, securing the other sites. So that has helped the government to set itself back up, that regional solidarity that you see every time a disaster hits the Caribbean. So that's the first piece. And the second, we have definitely benefited for our operations here and elsewhere from very timely military support military assets, and here we're talking particularly about helicopters, but also about water purification, desalination plants that are on naval vessels, which produced water, and then we could take that water inland and distribute that. And again, I draw particular attention to the countries I listed: Venezuela, U.S., U.K., Canada, France, and the Netherlands. I hope I'm not leaving anybody out, but certainly in the Dominican context, they have been key players there. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. O'Malley. On behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association, thank you for doing this briefing. In terms of recovery, what kind of price tag do you think is going to be needed for Dominica? And since you're responsible for Barbuda and a lot of the other hard-hit countries, what are we talking about? Hundreds of millions, $1 billion for recovery?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm gonna. If we look across Dominica and Barbuda, Turks and Caicos, British Virgin Islands, and Anguilla, the islands, and territories that were affected worst, I mean, I have no problem going out on a limb and saying that's $1 billion project over time, right? Over time. In each of those islands. We don't have exact figures yet. We're just completing now for Barbuda what we call a post-disaster needs assessment, which is done by the UN, by the government, and the World Bank. So that's a joint initiative. We are going to do a similar exercise here in Dominica, probably about 3 weeks out from now, and that's just because you've got to give people a chance to get the immediate response things taken care of. And then, of course, we have, as I say, we've got Turks and Caicos. We have the other Turks and Caicos, British Virgin Islands, and other territories as well. So, yeah, it's going to be a large-scale rebuilding effort that will take time. And it will be important to do that right. So maybe it's better for me to be a little vaguer and say $500 million to $1 billion. I'd probably feel more comfortable saying that range. But the important thing, and the Prime Minister of Dominica, for example, has spoken to this. What he has said is he wants to have the world's first climate resilient nation. They want to build back better. And they take that very, very seriously to make sure that that can be done. Because if you look at where we live now, where I'm sitting now, in a place where you see the effects of climate change, where we know the Caribbean Sea is heating up, the fact that the Caribbean Sea heats up, it will intensify the strength of hurricanes. It doesn't necessarily make them more frequent, but it intensifies their effect. So how do you protect yourself against that? How do you ensure that you have a resilient state and a resilient economy if you know that the risk factors are going to be elevating in this next period of time?
Thank you. Evelyn?
Yes, can you continue that? How do you protect yourself? And also, where did the residents of Barbuda go? And how many islands are you overseeing?
Okay, so let me start with the people of Barbuda. The people of Barbuda are on Antigua right now. They are about a quarter of them would be in shelters, and about 3/4 of them are with relatives or in other kinds of accommodation. From the people I have spoken to in the government, everybody knows these people want to go home. And that their home is in Barbuda. So the sooner that they can do that, the happier they're going to be. And that's why the government has embarked on this plan to clean the island as best as possible and allow people, starting with the people who had the least damage in their houses, to start going back to work on their houses and hopefully soon to be overnighting on the island as well. for me, from Barbados, I cover 10 countries, Barbados, and then the 9 countries that make up the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, and 3 of those are British overseas territories. The other 6 are independent states.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you very much. We'll be in touch. I appreciate you taking the time. And we now have Brendan. Don't go away. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Go ahead.